Hey everyone, and welcome to this cozy little corner of my new flat. I don't know if this will be my full-time setup, who knows, but I like it for now. I'm just figuring things out as I go, and yeah, let's talk about something serious.
Vanity hit everybody's radars early on for allegations of sexual assault, and at the time of this video, 21 women have accused Vanity of having sexually assaulted them, the majority of them when they were under the age of 18.
We saw Dahvie bringing underage girls to his hotel rooms and doing things, 100% illegal. I no longer support blood on the dance floor music and how disgusting Dahvie is.
We were tweeting back and forth, and then he DM'd me, "Hey, how old are you?" And I said, "Hey, Lainey, I'm 14.
Were there ever any inappropriate text messages sent from Kai, who again is Onision's partner, to you?
Yeah, but he would send me like pictures of like him without the top on.
And he has been recently outed as a child predator. That's the thing with YouTubers, you would never really know based on just what you see through their channel.
In 2018, a 15-year-old actress from the 7 Supergirls channel claimed that Rylid had forced her to sign a contract, which stated he would be allowed to touch her in an intimate nature. During a meetup in Florida, Rylid reportedly asked the young girl into his hotel room for a private meeting, where she was instructed to undress in front of him, allegedly even going so far as to berate her until she did what he said.
Basically, Kai was taking selfies, and he sent me a few of the selfies, and one of them, he didn't have any bottoms on, but he had a shirt on, and one of them, like, his entire, like, private was in the picture. There was at least one picture that I had sent of me when I was 15, topless.
The band's lead singer, Dahvie Vanity, has a pretty intense track record of forcing himself onto underage girls. He made a plan to visit her while her mother was present so he could cut her hair, however purposely waited until her mother had to go to work to show up at this girl's house, and then forced her to S his D. Greg was already starting his process of manipulating somebody who is not only underage, but a fan. Again, according to my sources, Greg had apparently rented a house in New Mexico for a little while Kai was finishing up high school.
Our investigation of Onision, who's a YouTube streamer who's been accused of being a predator, of seducing, control, and coercion, almost cult-like tactics involving many female victims.
Reportedly, Jones would leverage these girls' affection for him to get even more explicit videos, by asking them to prove that they were his biggest fans.
I'm just trying to help you. I know you're trying your hardest to prove you're my biggest fan, and I don't want to have to find someone else.
And I think it's one of those stories, just like with the Epstein case and R. Kelly and some of the others, that we need to stay on top of, so we will.
If there are YouTubers being outed so often, imagine all the YouTubers that haven't been outed yet. There has to be a ton of YouTubers out there that are preying on children, who are actively preying on children, you know, manipulating them behind the scenes.
So over the last few years, I've noticed more and more cases of YouTubers and famous and just like semi-famous people and influencers and God knows who else, these figures being exposed for abusing their fans. It seems like there's more and more every year, and it is a little bit disturbing and worrying. Most recently, you'll have probably heard of cases like Dahvie Vanity and Onision. Dahvie Vanity being the blood on the dance floor singer who is currently trying to make a comeback on Instagram under the username @DarkArtsOfficial, despite the fact he has been accused of literally raping and abusing children as young as 10 and 11, and there is some pretty heavy evidence to suggest that yes, he did actually do that. Onision, while not as bad, has been accused of grooming a girl as young as 14 and abusing and taking advantage of several other young women, partners of his who started off as fans. Another case you may be aware of was YouTuber Austin Jones, who is currently in prison because he was asking his underage fans to send videos of themselves twerking naked to prove they were, and I quote, his biggest fan. Disgusting. I've read some of the like police and court documents and stuff there, and repulsive man. These are probably just like the most high profile cases. They're by no means the only ones. There are so many more. This one article I found from 2017, which was 3 years ago now, so there's obviously been a lot more cases and stuff that's happened since. But this one article listed just like name after name of YouTubers who've been accused of abusing and taking advantage of their fans in one way or another. And it's important to mention that it's definitely not just YouTubers doing this. When it comes to celebrities and influencers and other well-known kind of famous figures, however you want to put it, there is undoubtedly what one journalist calls an imbalanced fan-creator relationship, which some people definitely take advantage of. And this is what I want to talk about today, specifically focusing on YouTubers, because I am a YouTuber and it's what I know and it's the community I'm part of, and that's why I feel like people like me should speak up and talk about this kind of thing, you know? So I guess what I really want to focus on today is, why does this happen? Why are there so many predators out there? Who are they targeting and taking advantage of? How you guys can spot the signs of potential abusers and keep yourself safe, how you can help keep others safe, and also what we as a community and YouTube as a platform and other social media platforms can do to protect its users and creators. Basically, how can we prevent this happening as much as possible in the future? Cases like the Dahvie Vanity stuff, the Onision stuff, I'm seeing it all over YouTube at the minute, and I do think it's very important to talk about. But I don't just want to regurgitate what everyone else has said. I want to look at these cases and say, what can we learn from this? How can we stop this happening? How can we protect actual and potential victims? I guess what initially inspired this video was watching the Chris Hansen interviews with the victims of Onision and Dahvie Vanity, and how in near enough every single one he either asks or they bring up how they got to know their abuser because they were a fan of them or knew their work or were kind of awed and inspired by their popularity and stuff like that, and their influence, you know?
Did this attention flatter you, the fact that they were getting back to you and communicating with you directly?
Yeah, no, I was definitely like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they want me. They were just like, they were like giving me so much attention, and I was so young and so infatuated with them, and so it made me feel so special and like, oh my gosh, like this is like meant to be. They're, you know, they're so nice, and you know, I kind of just looked up to them in a way. It wasn't really a sexual thing. It was just me like having like an idol.
You had contact with somebody who was in your mind a celebrity. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I tried really hard to get his attention because I thought he was cool and I had a crush.
You saw him as a major celebrity.
Yeah, I saw him as like a creative influence in the place I lived. And so I was like, yeah, I want to be with this dude who does cool hair and makes cool music and like is a model and stuff.
And now I know there's been some critique of Chris Hansen recently, but that's not what I want to cover in this video. And it's not kind of all that relevant to what I want to say, because the point I'm trying to make is that noticing he was bringing this up in interviews and noticing that the victims were bringing it up in interviews, it really got me thinking about this pattern. And this was kind of confirmed further when I watched this video recently by Mental Health Master on Dahvie Vanity, in which he mentioned the 3 A's of sexual abuse in children.
Keep in mind the 3 A's that are generally present when child sexual abuse occurs, because these are going to be present for the majority of the allegations that have been made against Vanity. The first one is access, which Vanity had through social media. The next one is alone time, which Vanity was able to arrange after gaining access to these individuals. And then the third one is authority, which in 2007 he was developing through his music, and later on he definitely had due to fame and popularity.
To go into a little more detail with this, one children's advocacy centre warns that these 3 A's, these 3 things, are things that must exist in order for someone to perpetuate sexual abuse. As YouTubers, we are definitely in a fairly unique position, and that we do have direct and fairly constant contact with our fans, which a lot of celebrities and famous people don't really have. Not calling myself a famous celebrity, I'm not, but I do have viewers and I do have this constant contact with you guys, and that does put me and other YouTubers, especially those with bigger platforms, in a very unique position. This comes with both its benefits and its drawbacks, you know? We can really connect with you guys, we get instant feedback, we're often as invested in some of your lives as we are in our own, and as much as you are in ours. it's nice to kind of get to know your viewers and your fans and kind of see their lives changing and growing and get to know them. We build these pretty real relationships with you guys. There's limited censoring, there's not a lot of like fake PR stuff. They're mostly like very authentic, real interactions, you know? Like I've definitely opened up to some of you guys when you've sent me messages and stuff in ways that, you know, you wouldn't normally connect with a random stranger. But because you guys kind of know certain things about me and you share those things with, and you share certain things about yourselves with me, I feel like we can have that slightly more like intimate conversation, you know? I mean, there's a hell of a lot of amazing positives there, but again, like I say, there are drawbacks, you know? That constant stream of feedback and communication can be incredibly overwhelming, especially when the feedback is negative. It can be terrifying. It does mean that as well as seeing the best parts of me, you often see the messy parts, the tired parts, the not so nice parts that I don't always want to show. And while you do get a fairly edited version of my life anyway, you know, you still see the rough stuff occasionally. Yeah, I don't know, pros and cons, you know, nothing's ever perfect. And while this level of kind of like access can be nice and can be great and it can lead to some real connections, this can be incredibly problematic when a celebrity or YouTuber has a very young fan base. This can be an issue. Even now, as an adult, it's exciting for me to get a message from someone I look up to or admire. So can you imagine how much more intense that is for a child or a teenager? If someone is a predator and they want to, they literally have all the access they want to as many young people as they want who already trust them and in many cases worship them. And that is an incredibly dangerous thing. Going back to like the 3 A's and talking about that in a bit more detail, this works alongside alone time because often teenagers' private messages or emails or chats or whatever won't be monitored by a parent or authority figure, so the predator has all the privacy and alone time they want to groom their victim, you know? Of course, physical alone time is a little trickier to get, but as we've seen, this doesn't stop predators, you know? Dahvie Vanity gained this physical alone time at his gigs. Onision did it by literally flying his victims across the country. Having the money and opportunities and time that a lot of YouTubers and other influencers have allows them to gain that alone time with potential victims easier than other people might. I should also note at this point that I don't believe the way to prevent this is for parents to be reading and checking in on their teenagers or children's messages and private chats and stuff like that, because I don't think that's fair. I think teenagers deserve that level of privacy and autonomy and respect, and I don't think having a parent read everything they do is appropriate. Instead, I think it's more important to talk to young people and educate them so they can identify predators for themselves and not fall for this kind of thing. I also think it's really important for parents and guardians and adults who are kind of authority figures in young people's lives to have these like really strong relationships where the young people feel they can talk to an adult if they ever feel uncomfortable or unsure about anything. So if they ever see any of these signs or they just want to talk things over or whatever, they can do. It's important to have those strong connections so the child or teenager never feels they have to hide anything from the adults in their life. That's how I think we prevent it, not by a parent constantly checking in on what the child's doing. But to go back to those 3 A's again, where celebrities really have the advantage over some predators, particularly online predators, and what makes the first 2 A's of alone time and access so easy for them is their position as authority figures. And that's what I really want to focus on today. Dahvie met most of his victims at concerts or on MySpace. Most were really big fans of him, and he used lines like "I'll help you with your music" or "I'll do your hair for you" as a way to gain their trust and therefore gain access to these young, mostly vulnerable or impressionable girls. Onision's spouse was literally like one of his biggest fans before they met. They were constantly tweeting to him before they met, and most of Onision's other victims and past partners and so on found him because they saw his videos or were, you know, in awe of his huge sub count, that kind of thing. Austin Jones literally got children to create and send him child pornography using the sickening "prove you're my biggest fan" line. They used and abused their authority to gain what they wanted as predators. Similarly, look at cases like family vlogger Chris Ingham. He's been accused of several young women over the age of consent, I'm going to add, so he's not necessarily a child predator, but he definitely takes advantage of women when he's already married and whatever. But he's definitely been accused of but he's definitely been accused by several young women of making inappropriate advances towards them who were his fans. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. One article in particular reports that one of his targets confided in friends who told her to be friendly back to him because obviously you do anything to speak to your favourite YouTuber. It goes on to say that messages attributed to Ingham in these exchanges show his fans confiding in him that they have anxiety, depression, or low self-confidence. In return, he suggests he will provide some sort of professional and personal support and emotional connection. He's using his status as an authority figure to basically hook them in and therefore take advantage. And while, like I say, Chris Ingham wasn't contacting underage girls, he was talking to young women who were fans of him, in some cases as young as 16, who were vulnerable in many ways. And if the accusations and messages are legitimate and proven to be true, he definitely took advantage of that power imbalance between them of creator and fan. I think it's really important to talk about this in more detail because I know that some people may argue that as long as a person's old enough and able to consent, what's the problem with fan-creator relationships? And I'll be honest, they're not always a problem, it's not always bad, but this is something I've had to think about myself, you know, on various personal levels as both a creator and a fan, and I don't really think there are any definite answers about, you know, this is always okay and this is never okay. I don't think it's black and white like that, but I do think it's very complicated and something we need to talk about and consider more, you know. As a public figure, a celebrity, someone with a following and or influence, these people do have power over their fans, whether they admit it or not. There's this one article that notes how the excitement of being noticed by a celebrity can leave people open to being manipulated, and then it goes on to note how the fans' judgment may be skewed because they feel they already know the influencer from their public image. You know, they might trust them more quickly than they usually would or should, and their feelings can be more intense and develop more quickly, you know. In fact, literally hours after I finished writing this script, so last night, there was this video that Creepshow Art, who you all know I adore, uploaded, where she was basically saying the same thing. So it's not just me. I mean, give this a listen.
The people who have come forward with their experience with Clap Daddy have been told numerous times that they are the ones at fault for what's happening, and they let things go too far somehow, and they should have realized what was happening beforehand, and they let it get out of hand, which is some grade A victim-blaming garbage. But more than that, it's not acknowledging the power dynamic that these relationships that they had with Clap Daddy had. Because when you look up to someone, when you like someone's videos, when you watch all of them, and you think they are creative, funny, and cool, and they make you feel seen without even acknowledging you, and then they turn around and give you all this love and attention and affection, you tend to make excuses for their behavior. You tend to say, they're not being weird, they're just my friend, they're this person, they could never do that. These people looked up to Clap Daddy. They thought he was an amazing artist doing dope ass shit online, so when things would eventually get weird, or he would say something offhandedly about how they shouldn't leave the call, or else he would get sad and manipulate them in that way, they were quick to make excuses. There's no way he could do this. He's famous.
I've definitely had to consider this for myself on like a personal level on several occasions. You know, as a creator, I don't think I could ever date a fan, but I have had issues dating people after they found out I'm a YouTuber. But like when I was at Faithless Forum last year, the organisers gave a really great and very important talk before the event about setting clear boundaries with attendees, and you know how they didn't think it was appropriate for us to flirt or hit on or anything any of the attendees and people who were there as our fans, and I obviously couldn't have agreed more with them. I think it was a very important thing for them to state and a very important thing for all of us to remember. To me, a relationship, whether long-term or short-term, should always be based on a very even level playing field, you know, based on mutual respect and neither having more power than the other. You know, I'm not sure I'd ever feel that was completely possible if I dated a fan, which is why I never would. And it's not just that, but I'd be constantly concerned with making sure I wasn't trying to take advantage of them in any other way. But just dating someone who knows you're a YouTuber can have issues of its own, which I've definitely dealt with. So just for a personal little ranty story time for you, I went on a couple of dates with a guy a few months ago, and I thought he was amazing at first. We got on so well, he was pretty damn perfect. And he didn't know me before we met, but after we'd been on a few dates, he was kind of like got into watching my YouTube videos and started to watch them, and he really liked them, and then we had an argument, and I kind of opened up to him about a lot of insecurities and stuff that I had, and basically he turned around and said, well, you're not exactly who you claim to be on your YouTube channel then, are you? You don't have all these insecurities on there. And I was like, yeah, no, of course not. Like, what did you really expect? Like, I present the best version of me, not the complete version of me. Yeah, so he was basically kind of shocked because I seemed so put together in my videos, and in reality I had all these insecurities that I finally opened up to him about, and he was like, oh, well, I don't really want that because I thought I was getting this, and you know. Anyway, you don't see every side of me on video, on camera, and he, I think, got into his head where he liked my public persona. He liked the idea of me. He didn't necessarily like the real me, so I broke things off with him because I didn't want that. And also, when I opened up to him about some self-harm issues, he called me crazy, so that was a no. But my point is that, like, as a public figure, there are all kinds of imbalances and things that you have to deal with, and it can go both ways. And I think it definitely complicates things, and it's something you have to think about and consider before you go into any kind of relationship and or friendship. It's something I've had to think about from the other side as well, where I was slightly involved with someone who I was a fan of for like 8 years, basically since I was 19, and was a musician I met a few months ago, and yeah, that was something where I had to kind of be very kind of aware and think about things, because, you know, this is a man I've looked up to since I was a teenager, and now suddenly he's showing an interest in me, and I had to try and be, like, very aware, make sure that I wasn't kind of being taken advantage of at all. And he didn't at all. He was an absolute gentleman, a wonderful guy, lovely, we're still in touch, he's amazing. But yeah, it's something you think about. I think a lot of the time it all kind of comes down to intentions and how comfortable all parties feel and the respect that everyone has for each other. And I think a big thing as well is kind of how you guys meet, because say, take that musician as an example. While I did meet him at one of his gigs, he didn't necessarily like realize I was a fan of his, because we got talking because one of his friends introduced me to him, and he thought I was there as like a friend of a friend, and we all had kind of like, I knew some of the other people at his gigs because my friends have played gigs with them, and we're all in similar circles basically. Take, on the other hand, like the Chris Ingham accusations, for example, and if they are true, they're incredibly problematic, because he was using his platform to find women who already liked and respected and trusted him. Then he would proposition them and then continue to pursue them even after they made it very clear that they weren't interested. He was using his platform to find people he could abuse, essentially, and that's not okay. Compare that to a time when I was in Texas for Faithless Forum, and a pretty well-known YouTuber hit on me at one point, and you know, he did it because I was there and because he was interested in me in the moment, not because he knew I was a fan of his, not because he was using his platform to find me. And when I said no, I wasn't interested, he completely respected that. He in no way made me feel uncomfortable. He listened to me, he respected me, and when I said no, we just went back to chatting as friends, and he was an absolute amazing guy about it. And that's completely different from the Chris Ingham situation, or the Onision situation, or the Dahvie Vanity situations. Not only because this YouTuber actually bothered to listen to me and respect me and never made me uncomfortable at any point, but because he in no way used his position, his power, the fact he had more subs than me, the fact he was more well-known than me. He never used his platform to target me, none of that. It's a very, very different situation. So what I'm saying is that not all fan-creator interactions are bad, but in certain circumstances, they are. So I guess this leads us to the questions of how do we know what's inappropriate? How do we spot signs of abuse or manipulation or power imbalance? And what can we do about it? You know, these are big, important questions I don't have definite answers to, but I think it's important that we discuss it. And if you have any further ideas on this other than what I'm about to talk about, please leave your ideas, your suggestions, your thoughts down in the comments below. I think this is a really important conversation that we all need to have. So for one thing, I think the big thing to consider is how old are you? if you are under the age of consent, it is not appropriate in any way for any adult to be flirting with you, hitting on you, or pressuring you in any way, no matter how much you might like them and how much you might think you want it. One study looked at this in a lot of detail and suggested that in order to combat this, and I quote, youths need candid, direct discussions about seduction and how some adults deliberately evoke and then exploit the compelling feelings that sexual arousal can induce. This information should include reassurances that it is normal to have strong sexual feelings, but wrong for adults to provoke or exploit these feelings, especially with youths who are inexperienced in coping with sexual desire and intimate relationships. So basically, no matter how much you might be attracted to someone who's an adult, it's not appropriate for them to be reciprocating it. And if they do, it's wrong on their part. And of course, it's not just teenagers and underage people and children who need to understand this, but the adults too. The same paper talks about how in a society where images of adolescent sexuality abound in the media, it may not be clear to many adolescents and adults that relationships between adults and underage adolescents are criminal. It is valuable for the public to hear messages that reinforce norms and counteract media that presents sexualized images of youths. So to summarize, it's important for adults to understand why what they're doing is wrong, as well as teenagers. Another factor this paper brought up was often the kinds of people who are vulnerable to predators are often, but not always, people with histories of offline sexual or physical abuse. It goes on to say that abuse history could be related to emotional needs or developmental distortions that make some youths less able to assess and more responsive to inappropriate sexual advances. Some such youths may be vulnerable to online sexual advances because they are looking for attention and affection. I'd argue this is definitely what Onision has seemed to do with a lot of his alleged victims. Sarah, for example, had a lot of issues at home, and Kai and Onision got her to open up about this stuff. She felt she could trust them, and this perhaps made her more vulnerable to the inappropriate advances that Kai and later Onision were making. She wasn't able to identify the fact they were inappropriate quite so easily until she was a lot older and more able to deal with that. In these cases, I think it would probably be a good idea for young people, or just anyone who knows they may be vulnerable to this sort of thing, to have friends, family, older adults they can talk to and discuss this stuff with, discuss the relationship with them, and say, do you think what is happening is appropriate, you know? Get an outside, unbiased perspective, especially from someone who doesn't know this person as a creator, a celebrity, an influencer, whatever. Another study looks at this point further by arguing that some of the most vulnerable youths to predators may be alienated from their parents, victims of familial abuse, or dealing with sensitive issues such as inner conflicts about sexual orientation that they feel their parents will not understand. Prevention strategies should be targeted more directly at adolescents themselves, using media and authorities, including other youths that have their confidence. So again, this comes back to educating people about what to look out for, what to avoid, and comes back to the points that Creepshow Art made. I think a big issue is that a lot of our society is very, celebrity-centric. It's very focused on fame and power and influence and that sort of thing. From a young age, people are bombarded with these images of fame being something to aspire to, seeing celebrities as these godlike figures, you know? Celebrities are given this status of being better than us, more powerful than us, blah, blah, blah. And we need to remind people that they're not, especially YouTubers. I mean, I get that it can be exciting for a celebrity or an influencer to message you or show interest in you or talk to you or want to get to know you or whatever. But ultimately you have to remember that they are just people like everyone else. And, they're no more special than anyone else. And so it's okay to question their motives and their actions. It's okay to stop talking to them if you ever feel uncomfortable. You don't owe them anything. They shouldn't have any control over you. They're not better than you or more important than you. And you definitely shouldn't have to be friendly to them just because they're a YouTuber, a celebrity, an influencer. As a community, I think the best thing we can do is to keep talking about the predators that are known. When people stopped talking about Dahvie Vanity for a long time, he thought he could make this comeback under a different username, and that's not okay. But now, hopefully at least, because people are talking about it again and are making his current username known and blah, blah, blah. Hopefully you won't be able to use this new platform to groom or abuse or manipulate any more children. At least we can hope. And the more we spread this kind of information, the less likely it is that he'll be able to find any more victims. The other thing comes down to the platforms themselves, like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. A lot of people are heavily critiquing these kinds of social media platforms because they aren't acting quickly enough or drastically enough to really protect children and other potential victims. One article suggested that YouTube needs to step up to the plate by implementing a warning system for young users. Something as simple as a pop-up that explains to under 18s that they should be careful who they message and meet online, while simultaneously it needs to issue guidelines to vloggers with a proper punishment system in place. Abusers remain on the platform to this day. I'm not sure if I think this idea of like little pop-up messages and stuff is the best strategy, but it's an option. I don't really know what the best strategy is, but I do know that more needs to be done than is currently in place, you know? Even when there is incredibly strong evidence and ongoing police investigations, you know, YouTube don't seem to act or be bothered about it. Austin Jones was literally arrested and being investigated by the police, and his channel and content was allowed to stay up. YouTube only removed it after he was sentenced. Even with the number of accusations and evidence that's out there, Dahvie Vanity has still got access to a large Instagram account, which he has been using to contact his fans and try and manipulate them in certain ways. There's still no restrictions on him. He's still able to contact all the children he wants without consequence. There's not even any real way to like report his account or let his past actions be known to his current followers. It's a huge issue. That said, of course we can't just remove or delete the account of everyone and anyone who has accusations against them, because this would not be fair on people who have false allegations raised against them. You know, it could ruin someone's career when they haven't actually done anything wrong. But I do think more needs to be done. Perhaps some kind of middle ground, perhaps some kind of temporary suspension or removal of certain rights or tools, for example, the ability to private message, while accusations are looked into. Basically anything more than what's happening right now, you know? And so at this point, I'm going to end this here and hand the conversation over to you. Sorry if this has been a lot of me talking and ranting, but it is a topic I feel very, very passionate about and very strongly about. Obviously, you know, while I don't want kids myself, I am very, very, very protective of children and care a hell of a lot about this kind of thing. So down in the comments, let me know some of your thoughts. Why do you think there are so many predators using social media platforms and becoming influencers and using sites like Tumblr and Instagram to target victims in this way? Why do you think there are so many of them? What do you think that we as a community can be doing to keep people really safe? And most importantly, what measures do you think social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Twitter can and should be doing? What practices and tools can they bring in to try and protect its users as much as possible? I would absolutely adore if you would leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about this because I think it's very, very important. But for now, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, I appreciate you guys so much. Sorry I've had a bit of a gap in making videos, but I've just moved house and it's been crazy and I still have boxes behind the camera over there and stuff to unpack, but it's very, very slowly coming together. So I appreciate all your patience, thank you so much. I appreciate you watching today and hopefully I will see you guys again very, very soon.